Data science and data literacy, they're difficult to teach. Why? Because the body of knowledge that I have as a data science educator is considerably advanced to the body of knowledge that all of my students possess. So I have to create mechanisms to bridge that gap. And this isn't just a challenge that I face. Obviously, anyone who is explaining the technology to people who are experiencing it, understanding it for the first time, have this massive gap. And without a point of reference, if I don't give students a point of reference, someplace where this technology fits, and then further down, more granularly, each concept that I teach, I have to give students a place where it fits in this overall picture, this massive, massive amount of information that I'm giving when I teach data science and machine learning. I have to give it a starting point, a point of reference so you know where it fits. And I'm not the only one educating. You have traditional educators in academia. You have people like myself who are practitioners and teachers. We teach because we have the experience. You also have companies that sell. They use education as a sales technique. And it's very important to educate your customers. However, everyone has a different objective when they're educating. And if you, like myself, need to get students all the way to the point of understanding the technology, we have to create that initial bridge and then start filling in all the gaps and providing all the information so that you understand the technology completely. However, if you're selling or if you're doing some marketing, there is a different objective. You want to explain to your students who are really going to become customers, not so much what the technology does, but what the technology is going to do for them. And this introduces a technique that we all use, whether we are educators or salespeople. We use what a gentleman named Eric Chown, who recently did a presentation about digital metaphors, and he's got a book coming out about that here pretty soon. We use these digital metaphors to give you a point of reference, and they are amazing tools at helping you understand what technology can do for you. But those digital metaphors are incomplete. Why? They have a lot of assumptions hidden under the covers because we are comparing a new technology to something familiar, something you know. But just like any metaphor, and this is something that Eric Chown brought up very effectively by using a metaphor from Shakespeare, where Romeo calls Juliet the sun, says she is the sun. Is she literally the sun? Is she emitting any sort of radiation that might kill you? No. So we understand with a normal metaphor that there are limitations to it. But with a digital metaphor where we have really no point of reference for the new concept that's being introduced to us, we don't understand where the assumptions come into play and where the differences are and where our prior knowledge of this thing that's more familiar to us diverges from this new concept. Let me give you an example. Email. Email is a great digital metaphor. Why? Because we just said mail. The technology under email looks nothing like mail. Yes, there are messages and content and videos and all sorts of things that we can trade electronically. And there are some similarities to your physical mail, the thing you get in your mailbox, and this new digital form of communication. However, there are significant differences. When companies in the 90s started explaining email, they used the digital metaphor that connected it to traditional mail. So people, users, would have an immediate point of reference and understood what the technology did for them. They did not understand the technology itself. And so things like viruses and scams were able to propagate because there are differences. If you look at the return address on a letter, sure, it can be spoofed, but I mean, where it comes from is usually pretty trustworthy. If your mother sends you a letter, you can usually trust the contents. You can open it up and believe what's inside of it. And you look at the return address and you say, yeah, that's actually my mom. And you look at it and you say, yeah, that sounds like my mother. However, in the digital world, so much can be spoofed. So much can be using the technology and exploiting the technology in many cases. So many things that you can trust in the real world can't necessarily be trusted in the same way in the virtual and digital space. And so those assumptions that you have, that this letter that says that purports itself to be from your mother is actually from your mother versus this email that the signature has been spoofed to be from your mother or from someone you trust, you can't have that same level of trust between the two. And so scams propagated, and people would open emails and open attachments because they saw the email address of someone they knew, and they trusted it, not realizing that one of the large differences between traditional mail and email is you can have a virus sent via email or a Trojan or worm of some sort of malicious software. And all you have to do is open the link and there it is. It's now on your computer. You've been exploited by the differences, the difference between the metaphor that was made to you. Email isn't exactly like real mail. So that metaphor was an extraordinarily effective sales technique because people immediately understood what email would do for them. However, the limitations of their understanding, the fact that there was no filling in of all the gaps and explaining where all the assumptions fail, well, that led to issues and uses of the technology that weren't exactly perfect. They weren't exactly the way that someone who truly had the technology explained to them would use it. And so as an educator, I am trying to fill all of those gaps in. I'm going to use a digital metaphor at first to give you a point of reference and create at least some sort of framework for that bridge between you have minimal understanding to now, okay, I understand why what I'm about to learn is relevant, and not only relevant, period, but also relevant to me. And that's what a digital metaphor is wonderful at. But then after that, I have to talk to you about specifics. And so not just this is what the technology does for you, but this is what the technology does. And especially with data science, there's a lot of complicated pieces moving under the covers. And a company which is trying to sell you something is going to provide you with excellent educational resources, but they have the objective of you knowing enough to make a purchasing decision. Whereas an educator is going to have a different objective. If you're in traditional academia, your objective is going to be to pass on some knowledge. And there isn't necessarily a specific application because as an educational institution, you are teaching a wide range of students who will go on to do a number of different things with the knowledge that you're imparting upon them. And so there's no particular objective except for them to be able to pass tests, which test their comprehension of the concepts that you've been teaching them. And so they have that objective. Myself as an educator, I speak to business-focused people. That means that you are either going to be a practitioner or you're going to be a decision maker in a business setting, someone who is accountable for understanding what all of this does. And so my objective is slightly different. I have more of an applied and more narrow focus when I'm trying to teach you all of these concepts about data science, machine learning, advanced analytics, and so on. I realize that you have applications, you have use cases, so I'm teaching you for more narrow, more specific purposes than, say, an academic institution, which by nature teaches for a wide variety of needs. And you have to take all of that into consideration when you are learning, especially as a non-technical or non-data scientist, non-analyst. When you're learning a new technology, especially something like data science, when you're trying to become data literate or data science literate, looking at who is teaching you and what their objectives are is an extraordinarily important evaluation point. And also realizing the shortcomings of some of the education that you've already received. If most of the education that you've been given is by sales, marketing, companies truly who are trying to sell you, then you are likely to be suffering from some of the assumptions of a digital metaphor-based curriculum that does not have the objective of going all the way to the point of you being applied or a practitioner. outside of applying it to a specific decision, which is, well, should we buy this company's product? Do we need this company's product? What could this product do for us? Not necessarily how does this product work or how do the technologies underneath this product working. So that's the difference. And that is one of the reasons why companies can feel data literate and data science literate, but continue to make some decisions that have, well, they have some bad assumptions baked into them because they've been taught through digital metaphor and haven't had any of the additional pieces filled in for them. So it's important when you're pursuing data literacy, when you're looking at data science literacy, to make sure that you've gone beyond the digital metaphor to truly understanding the technology. This is one of the important reasons to have data scientists in the room when you're making decisions about data science and machine learning-based products, projects, automation, purchasing software, purchasing utilities and tools. Very important to have someone who has deeper than that digital metaphor knowledge. It's also important for some executives to actually get educated, not to the point where they're data scientists, but to get past that digital metaphor stage and to understanding how the technology works, because you're able to make better decisions and interact with your data and analytics organization and just interact better with data products. If you understand how they work, not just what they do for you, you'll find your decisions about them are more effective because you have that longer lens background on how the technology works. And that helps decision-making wise, using it and being a consumer of data and analytics products. All of that background, getting past the digital metaphor, is extraordinarily helpful for many decision makers and groups that will interact heavily or who rely heavily on data analytics or the outputs of models. And so there's a point to actually, as a non-technical, non-data scientist, learn data science. There is a pretty good purpose to getting past the digital metaphor type knowledge and getting deep enough into the concepts that are under the covers to really understand better what's going on, how it impacts you, make some better decisions about it, consume what's being produced for you and given to you more effectively. It's worth learning. It's worth going past the digital metaphors. But more importantly, you have to identify in your knowledge base what is just digital metaphor based, what do you have digital metaphor knowledge of, and what do you actually have depth of knowledge of? Because that's going to limit and change the way you make decisions. You have sort of a false confidence if you have digital metaphor, but you don't realize that there is a depth beyond that, and there are some assumptions baked in that you need to understand and question. And so you can act with false confidence. It's important to assess yourself. Just do a very honest skills and knowledge assessment to see where your knowledge starts and stops. There's nothing wrong with having digital metaphor understandings of a lot of these complex technologies. I don't understand my cell phone 100%, and yet I am able to use it very effectively and make decisions about how I use it and how I should interface with it very effectively with nothing more in most cases than digital metaphor knowledge. However, if I'm making more complex business decisions based on my cell phone, I need to take that next step. And I need to have a deeper understanding so that I don't just understand how my cell phone works for me. I understand how it works. I don't just understand what it does for me. I understand what it does and how it does that, which is more important when I'm starting to bet money, when I'm starting to book revenue on how my cell phone works. Obviously, I need a greater depth of knowledge at that point. But just to use my cell phone, digital metaphors are absolutely perfect. So in many cases, when it comes to data literacy and data science literacy, all you really need is that digital metaphor knowledge. Know how it works for you, and that's great. That's enough. However, when you start making decisions, when things become complex with advanced analytics, with you consuming the output of inference or making decisions about projects, products, then you need that next step. You need to go beyond digital metaphor to having a deeper understanding of how it works. So that is the danger of the digital metaphor. sometimes the limitations of your sales and marketing education, and some of the benefits of traditional academia, or someone like myself, the more online self-paced programs teaching you, and that'll give you a frame of reference for when. When should you pay money versus when is it just fine to get that free digital metaphor, surface level understanding so that you know how to use it, because sometimes that's all you need to know. And you shouldn't have to pay for that. Companies will give that to you for free as part of them trying to sell you their product. It's part of the training. So don't pay for that. Don't shell out cash when you don't truly need to go past digital metaphor knowledge. And hopefully, you'll be better equipped now to assess what you know and what you need to know, as well as where you're going to go in order to get it.